In the heavy downtown traffic, a motorcyclist suddenly fell on the road next to them. While other drivers panicked, the elderly Uber driver executed a perfect evasive maneuver within seconds. The movement was so precise and calculated that the passenger asked, "Are you a pilot?" The driver smiled quietly. "I used to be. But now I just safely land people on the ground." Welcome to the human stories. Before we begin this compelling story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Robert Miller, 52 years old, gray-haired, medium-built man. He worked as an Uber driver and had been doing this job for the past 3 years. He looked ordinary, dressed neatly, spoke politely, but wasn't overly friendly. He only made necessary conversations with customers and quietly took them to their destinations. The inside of his car was always clean. An older model Camry, but well-maintained. Seats organized, AC working, radio on, but turned down low. Someone looking carefully might notice a few details inside the car. Always a pen in his chest pocket, a small compass on the dashboard, and a tiny badge hanging from the rearview mirror. But what it was couldn't quite be made out. Robert had a 4.98 average on Uber. Customers commented on him as quiet but reliable, punctual, clean car. Nobody wrote anything special about him because Robert also tried not to draw attention. Working in San Diego traffic wasn't easy. Especially during evening hours, everyone was stressed, everyone in a hurry. But Robert never stressed out. He seemed to see traffic from a third dimension, making smooth transitions between lanes, never needing sudden brakes or accelerations. Other drivers called him old man, called him slow. But Robert didn't care. He did his own job, drove safely, got his customers to their destinations on time. His working hours weren't fixed either. Sometimes early morning, sometimes afternoon, sometimes late at night. But there was a routine. Before each ride, he'd walk around his car, check the tires, look at fuel level, adjust his mirrors, as if he was doing pre-flight checks. Nobody noticed these details. He was just a working, reliable Uber driver. Until that evening. That evening, Robert's customer was a 28-year-old engineer. His name was Daniel Turner, leaving his company to go home. From his workplace to his apartment in Mission Valley would be about a 45-minute journey with evening traffic. Daniel sat in the back seat, politely said, "Good evening." Robert responded with the same courtesy and set off. The first 15 minutes went normally. Daniel was looking at his phone. Robert was driving quietly. But Daniel was a careful person. His engineering profession had taught him to look at details, and he started noticing something in Robert's driving style. The first thing that caught his attention was that Robert didn't use GPS. Most drivers working in San Diego would constantly look at GPS because traffic conditions constantly changed. But Robert seemed to know the route by heart. He only occasionally listened to traffic reports on the radio. The second strange detail was Robert's lane-changing technique. Very smooth, very calculated. He never made sudden movements, as if he was planning every movement of the car millimeter by millimeter. The third notable point was Robert's hands. The way he held the steering wheel was in a very special technique. Fingers in certain positions, wrists relaxed but ready. Daniel couldn't remember where he knew this from, but it seemed familiar. "Sir," Daniel said, "you drive very smoothly. You must be very experienced." "Thank you," Robert said. "I've been driving for a long time." "How many years have you been working as a driver?" "Driving for hire for 3 years, but driving much longer than that." This answer caught Daniel's attention. His emphasis on driving and separating it from driving for hire seemed strange. Just then, the traffic lights ahead turned yellow. Robert slowed down and stopped. Next to them, in the left lane, was a motorcyclist, a young courier in a hurry. When the light turned green, everyone moved at the same time. The motorcyclist shot out quickly, but just then, A van coming from the opposite lane ran the red light and entered the intersection. Daniel heard the horn, heard the brakes, and then saw the motorcyclist fall. The man was on the ground, the motorcycle thrown to one side, the vehicle stuck in the middle of traffic. Other drivers panicked. Some stopped, some tried to escape, some honked. Traffic suddenly turned to chaos, but Robert didn't panic at all. Daniel watched what he did. Robert acted as if he had planned for this situation beforehand. First, he positioned his car safely. Then he moved his hand not to the brake, but to the gear shift area. And then he performed a maneuver Daniel never expected. Robert moved his car forward with millimeter precision, then turned right, then backed up. The movement was so fluid, it was as if he was dancing with the car. And as a result, he managed to park safely next to the fallen motorcyclist, without hitting any vehicle, without putting anyone in danger. "What?" Daniel started but couldn't finish his sentence. Robert got out of his car, went to the injured motorcyclist. He checked the man's condition, called 911, and then started organizing traffic. He was using his hands to signal other drivers, ensuring traffic flow. Daniel sat in the car, watching in amazement. Robert's movements were so professional, so calculated. It was as if he was very experienced with these kinds of emergencies. The ambulance came. The injured courier was taken. Traffic returned to normal. Robert returned to his car, put on his seatbelt, and continued on the road as if nothing had happened. Daniel couldn't hold back. "Sir, are you a pilot?" Robert smiled quietly. "I used to be, but now I just safely land people on the ground." Daniel's breath caught. "Really? What kind of pilot were you?" "Air Force. How many years did you fly?" 22 years. Daniel looked in amazement. 22 years, and now you're an Uber driver? Robert took a deep breath. "My military pension isn't enough. I have kids, a house payment. I need to work." "But you were a pilot. That's a very prestigious profession." "It was. But the past stays in the past. Now I have a different job." Daniel asked curiously, "What type of aircraft did you fly?" F-16, before that F-4. Mostly defense missions, border patrol." "Did you ever have combat missions?" Robert paused, thought. Some missions aren't considered combat, but they're not easy either. Daniel understood this was a sensitive topic. He didn't ask more, but he had hundreds of questions in his mind. "So why did you leave aviation?" "Age limit. After 45, you're not taken for operational flights. They offered desk work, but I was a pilot to fly, not to shuffle papers." As the journey continued, Daniel's curiosity also increased. Robert had started opening up a bit more. "What was it like being a pilot?" Daniel asked. "A responsibility you can't imagine," Robert said. "You're not just responsible for yourself. You're responsible for your aircraft, your mission, sometimes your country." "Were you ever scared?" "Fear was normal. But not panicking came with training, like what I did today. Staying calm in a crisis, making the right decisions." "That maneuver, how did you do that maneuver in between?" Robert smiled. "We call it spatial awareness, three-dimensional thinking. In an aircraft, you need to know everything around you, which direction the aircraft is going, where the wind is blowing from, what the weather is like. The same thing exists in traffic. Now I understand why you don't use GPS." "Yes. I'm used to seeing routes from the air. I've flown over San Diego thousands of times. I know every street, every intersection." Daniel asked in amazement, "You flew over San Diego?" "Of course. Air defense mission. San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco. All major cities were our area of responsibility." "Wow. I've never met someone like this. Most of us transitioned to normal life. Some work in private aviation, some became instructors. Some, like me, do completely different jobs." Daniel got curious. "Do other customers know?" No, you're the first to ask. Most people don't pay much attention. Has no one ever noticed? A few people have. Once I picked up a retired pilot, he understood. Once a young aviation student. But generally nobody wonders. You don't tell them either. The past isn't something to brag about. What job I do today, that's what matters, Daniel thought. But people should know you. You should get respect. Respect comes from the work you do. Whether I'm good as a driver now, that's what's important. But you protected your country. And now I protect my passengers. I try to transport them safely. The mission changed. The responsibility is the same. Daniel gathered courage and asked, "Did you ever experience dangerous situations?" "While flying, I mean." Robert paused, looked at the traffic. "Once I had engine failure. I landed with one engine." "Weren't you scared?" "I was scared, of course. But training kicked in. You feel fear, but you apply the procedure." "How did you land?" "Stay calm, maintain control, make alternative plans, like what I did today. When that motorcyclist fell, I did the same thing." "So you still think like a pilot?" "Once you become a pilot, you always remain a pilot. You just use different vehicles." This answer impressed Daniel very much. He realized he was traveling with someone truly different. Just then, heavy traffic formed ahead of them. A truck had broken down in the middle of the road. Only one lane was open. Other drivers were starting to get irritated, but Robert stayed calm. He listened to alternative routes on the radio, made calculations in his mind. "Sir," Daniel said, "is there an alternative route?" "There is, but it's longer. But with current traffic, we can arrive in the same time." "How do you know?" "I'm used to making flight plans." Finding the most efficient route from point A to point B. Robert calmly turned right, entered side roads. They indeed started progressing faster than the main road. "How do you know this route?" "Knowing San Diego from the air provides an advantage. I know where every street leads." Daniel was amazed. "You really are different." When they arrived in Mission Valley, Daniel was very impressed. While making the payment, he said, "Sir, thank you so much, both for the safe journey and for a very educational conversation." "I thank you. You were a good passenger." "Can I ask a question?" "Ask." "Do you regret it?" Leaving piloting, Robert thought. "Regret doesn't change the past. I serve in a different way now." "How so?" "Before I protected the skies. Now I protect my passengers. The service is the same. The vehicle is different." Daniel had developed great respect for him. "Can I choose you again?" "Of course. Safe travels." Daniel got out of the car, but he would never forget Robert. That night, Daniel was thinking about Robert at home. 52 years old, served his country for 22 years, flew F-16. And now, working as an Uber driver in San Diego traffic. But he had noticed something. Robert had never complained. He never bragged saying, "I was a pilot." He was just doing his job, continuing to serve people. Daniel told this story to his friends. They were also amazed. Really? Incredible. Are there such people? But Daniel understood that there are people like Robert everywhere. We just don't try to get to know them. In the following weeks, Daniel called Robert again. They traveled together several more times. Each time, he learned a little more from Robert's story. Robert was still working with the same calm, same professionalism, never bragging, never complaining, just doing safe driving, serving his customers. In their last ride, Daniel had asked, "Sir, what advice would you give to young pilots?" "Not to forget to be humble," Robert had said. "The sky makes you humble. No matter how good you are, nature is more powerful than you." "What about life advice?" "Try to be better than the previous day, every day, with small steps but continuously." These words stayed in Daniel's mind. And that day, he understood that real heroes don't brag. They just continue to serve. Robert Miller was an ordinary Uber driver until a crisis moment happened in traffic. Then everyone understood that sometimes the most ordinary-looking people can have the most extraordinary pasts. Have you ever met someone like this? Someone who seemed ordinary but had an extraordinary past? Share their stories in the comments and tell us which city you're watching from. If this story touched you, subscribe and help ensure stories like this are heard. Because sometimes the strongest people are the quietest ones, until we meet in the next story. And remember, next time you travel with a taxi, Uber, or any driver, maybe their story runs much deeper than you think.